The mockery begins. Emerges empire. The war had ended, but for humanity, the true battle had just begun. The Galactic Council, a mighty alliance of alien species, had declared humans defeated. Their homeworld had suffered, their fleets were shattered, and their people were left with almost nothing. As a gesture of goodwill, the Council offered compensation, a collection of old, rusted warships from the scrapyards of the galaxy. These ships, once used in battle centuries ago, were now worthless to the Council's great empires. The moment the humans received them, the galaxy erupted in laughter. "They think they can rebuild with those," sneered a Selvari general, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "Those ships belong in a museum, not a battlefield." The Vorkari, a proud and warlike species, mocked them even harder. Their leader, Grand Marshal Tovak, laughed as he watched the humans inspect their new fleet. "Pathetic," he said, "a dying race clinging to rusted corpses." Every broadcast across the galaxy repeated the same message. Humanity is over. They are weak. They will never rise again. But inside the main warship, Captain Elias Kane stood tall, his eyes cold as he looked at the rusted remains of what was once the pride of humanity. He was a man who had seen too much war, lost too many comrades, and suffered enough betrayal. But there was one thing he had not lost: hope. His second-in-command, Commander Leora, stood beside him, arms crossed as she examined the ships. "They're laughing at us, Captain. They think we're finished." Kane smirked. "Let them laugh." Leora raised an eyebrow. "You really think we can fight with this junk?" Kane turned to the main control panel. A weapon is only as weak as the hands that wield it. The rusted warships were indeed ancient and broken, but Kane knew something the aliens didn't. The Galactic Council had never truly understood human technology. They relied on their predictable, safe advancements. Their ships were powerful, but inflexible. They followed rules, obeyed limits. But humanity had no limits. Kane tapped a button, and the ship's old systems flickered to life. The hum of an ancient power core rumbled beneath the metal. It was weak, barely functioning, but still alive. Lyra's eyes widened. "This ship, it's different." Kane nodded. Before the war, the old fleets were designed with hidden quantum core reactors. We never had the chance to use them. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Quantum cores. But that technology was lost. Not lost, Kane corrected. Buried. The Council never understood it. They only saw the rust, not what was inside. A slow grin spread across Leora's face. "So they gave us weapons, without realizing it." Kane's expression hardened. "Now, we rebuild, and when the time comes, they won't be laughing anymore." Meanwhile, across the stars, the Galactic Council continued to celebrate. On the grand homeworld of the Vorkari Dominion, the warlords drank toasts in honor of their victory over humanity. Grand Marshal Tovak, the same alien who had once led fleets against Earth, stood before a great gathering of leaders. "Humanity is no longer a threat," he declared. "They are nothing but scavengers now, left to rot among their rusted ships." The chamber erupted in applause. In their eyes, the war was over. In their arrogance, they never imagined that far away, in the cold void of space, an empire was about to rise from the ashes. The beginning of something greater. Back in the human fleet, the engineers worked tirelessly to restore power to the warships. The once dead vessels, covered in rust and scars of past battles, began to breathe again. Dr. Leora ran the diagnostics, her hands moving quickly over the control panels. The readings were unbelievable. "Captain, the core is stabilizing. This ship isn't just operational, it's powerful." Kane's smile was grim. "Good, because soon they will come for us again." Leora hesitated. "And if they do?" Kane turned, looking out at the vast expanse of space. His voice was calm, unshaken. "They sold us rusted warships, but soon they will bow before them. The hidden power within." The rusted warships floated in the dark void of space, their battered hulls a reminder of past battles. To any outsider, they looked like useless relics, barely holding together. But inside the flagship Resolute, Captain Elias Kane and his crew were uncovering a secret that could change everything. Dr. Leora stood in front of the central console, her fingers tapping rapidly as she analyzed the ship's core. Her voice trembled with excitement. "Captain, these readings don't make sense." Kane folded his arms. "Explain." Leora turned to face him, her eyes shining with realization. "The power core isn't just old. It's something else. The Council thought these ships were dead because their scanners only picked up surface-level energy." She gestured to the massive reactor at the ship's heart. "But deep inside, there's a quantum core." The room fell silent. A quantum core, a forgotten human technology, was impossible to reproduce, even by the Council's most advanced species. It had been theorized to be limitless, capable of bending space-time itself. But during the war, humanity had been too weak to deploy it properly. Now, these ships, deemed scrap, held the most powerful energy source the galaxy had ever seen. Kane's voice was calm, but his grip tightened on the railing. "How functional is it?" Leora took a deep breath. "It's weak. It's been dormant for centuries. But if we can stabilize it," she met his eyes, "we'll have something the galaxy has never seen before." Commander Darius, Kane's tactical officer, frowned. "And if we can't?" Leora hesitated. "Then the core could collapse and take half the fleet with it." Silence. Then Kane smirked. "Sounds like a risk worth taking. A race against time." The engineers worked day and night, stabilizing the core, bypassing broken circuits, and reactivating the long-lost human technology. One by one, the rusted ships began to awaken. The once-dead engines hummed with energy. The faded hulls started to glow faintly. The weapons, outdated and useless before, began to power up. The transformation was slow but undeniable. For the first time in years, the human fleet was alive again. But Kane knew they were running out of time. The Galactic Council would not ignore them for long. A deadly mistake by the Council. Meanwhile, in the capital of the Galactic Council, reports were coming in about strange energy readings from the human fleet. Grand Marshal Tovek, leader of the Vorkari Dominion, frowned as he listened to the intelligence officer's briefing. "You're telling me the scrap fleet is showing energy signatures?" The officer hesitated. "Yes, sir, but it's most likely a malfunction. Their technology is ancient. There's no way." Tovek growled. "No way. That's what we thought before they took out an entire raiding fleet last week. The Council had underestimated humans before. They would not do so again." Tovek slammed his fist on the table. "Deploy a scouting force. I want to see exactly what these broken ships are capable of." His order was clear. Find out if the humans were truly a threat, and destroy them before they could rise again. The first test of power. Back in the human fleet, the moment of truth had arrived. The quantum core inside Resolute was finally stable. The power levels were rising, stronger than ever before. Kane stood on the bridge, his crew watching the monitors. "Are we ready?" he asked. Leora nodded. "As ready as we'll ever be." Kane gave a single command: "Activate the core." For a brief second, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding pulse of energy, the entire ship vanished from sight. A gasp rippled through the crew. 1 second, they were in the middle of the fleet. The next, they were on the other side of the system. The bridge was silent as everyone processed what had just happened. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "Captain, we just jumped across light years. Instantly." Kane exhaled slowly. "The Council has no idea what they've given us." He turned to his crew, his eyes filled with something dangerous. Determination, hope, and revenge. The first battle. A desperate gamble. The bridge of the Resolute was silent, except for the steady hum of the quantum core pulsing beneath their feet. Captain Elias Kane stood at the command console, staring at the readings on the main screen. The impossible had just happened. Their rusted, broken warship had just jumped across light years in an instant. Commander Leora was the first to break the silence. "Captain, do you realize what this means?" Kane nodded, his expression unreadable. "It means we're no longer helpless." But before anyone could celebrate, the alert sirens blared. Enemy ships detected. Incoming vessels. The enemy approaches. On the edge of the human fleet, space shimmered as a Vorkari scout force dropped out of hyperspace. Aboard the lead Vorkari battleship, Commander Orville smirked as he looked at the human fleet through the viewing screen. "Pathetic," he muttered. "I almost feel bad for them." His second-in-command, a towering Vorkari warrior, grunted. "Orders." Orville leaned forward. "Simple. Destroy them." He activated the fleet-wide communication and spoke with mocking amusement. "Humans, we have come to end your suffering. Surrender now, and we will grant you a quick death." The Vorkari fleet moved forward, their weapons charging. To them, this was a formality, a cleanup operation. To humanity, it was life or death. The first strike. Kane watched the enemy approach, his face calm but his mind racing. The human fleet was outnumbered and outgunned. Their ships were still old and rusted on the outside. They had one chance, a desperate gamble. He turned to Leora. "Is the core stable enough to use again?" She hesitated. "Yes, but Captain, we've only tested it once. If it fails..." Kane's voice was firm. "If we do nothing, we die. We use what we have." Leora nodded. Kane turned back to his crew. "Listen up. We can't match them in firepower, but we have something they don't. We have the element of surprise." He pointed to the enemy ships on the screen. "We let them think we're weak. We wait for them to get close. And then," he clenched his fist, "we strike. The trap is set." The Vorkari ships closed in, their weapons locking onto the human fleet. Inside the Resolute, every crew member held their breath. "Hold," Kane ordered. The enemy was now within firing range. Orville grinned as he watched the human fleet remain still. They're frozen in fear. He raised his clawed hand. "Fire." A wave of plasma torpedoes and laser blasts streaked toward the human ships. Kane exhaled sharply. Now. In an instant, the entire human fleet vanished. The counterattack. Orville blinked. "What?" Before he could react, the rusted human warships reappeared, right behind his fleet. His sensors screamed with warning signals. Impossible. How did they? But it was too late. Kane's voice was cold as he gave the order. "Fire everything." The human warships, once considered weak and useless, unleashed destruction. Laser cannons, railguns, and torpedoes ripped through the Vorkari fleet. The enemy, caught off guard and out of position, panicked. Orville's eyes widened as his battleship shuddered under the impact. His fleet, which had been so confident just moments ago, was being torn apart. Victory and fear. Within minutes, the battle was over. The once mighty Vorkari fleet lay in ruins, their ships burning in the void. Orville, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead, staggered as his damaged vessel barely remained intact. He could hardly believe it. How did they do this? His second-in-command's voice was filled with fear. "Sir, they are not weak." Orville stared at the human fleet, now glowing with an eerie energy. The same ships they had once laughed at were now unstoppable. He clenched his fists. The Council must be warned. As the last few surviving Vorkari ships fled, Kane watched them go, his face emotionless. Lyra exhaled in relief. "We did it." Kane turned to her, his voice calm but filled with something dangerous. "No." He watched the wreckage floating in space. This was only the beginning. Humanity had made its first move. And now, the galaxy would learn to fear them. The galaxy takes notice. The wreckage of the Vorkari fleet drifted silently in space, a grim reminder of what had just happened. The battle was over. The once mocked rusted warships of humanity had turned into the deadliest force the galaxy had seen in centuries. Captain Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the last surviving enemy ships flee into the darkness. "They'll be back," Commander Leora murmured. Kane nodded. "Good. Let them bring more." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. The Galactic Council would not ignore this. The moment the Vorkari ships reached their homeworld, news of humanity's impossible victory would spread across the stars. And when it did, the entire galaxy would be watching. The Council's reaction. In the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council, a meeting was already underway. The leaders of the most powerful alien civilizations sat in their thrones, their expressions ranging from disbelief to barely contained rage. At the center of the chamber, Grand Marshal Tovak of the Vorkari Dominion stood, his body tense with fury. He slammed his clawed fist against the table. "This is an outrage, a deception. There is no way the humans could have won." One of the council members, a reptilian being known as Senator Vorel, narrowed his eyes. "And yet they did." Tovak's mandibles twitched. "You don't understand. Their fleet was nothing but scrap metal. Those ships should not have been able to fight, let alone destroy an entire battle group." Another member, the towering insectoid Chirex Highlord, clicked his mandibles. "Perhaps we underestimated them." Tovak's claws curled into fists. This was not human ingenuity. They must have stolen forbidden technology from somewhere. There is no other explanation. Senator Vorel leaned forward. "Regardless of how they did it, the fact remains, the humans have just proven they are still a threat." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The war against humanity had ended in their defeat. But now, they had returned. Stronger, deadlier. If they could destroy a Vorkari fleet with just a handful of old warships, what would they be capable of once they fully restored their power? The fear in the room was almost palpable. Tovak growled, "We should destroy them now before they grow any stronger." The Chirex High Lord hesitated. Attacking them directly could be dangerous. Another member, the leader of the Krell Empire, shook his head. "It does not matter how. We must ensure that humanity is crushed before they rise beyond our control." The decision was made. The Council would not sit back and watch humanity regain its power. They would strike first. The shadow of war returns. Back on the Resolute, Kane stood with his officers, studying the holographic projection of the Galactic Council's military forces. Leora sighed. "We won this battle, but we won't be so lucky next time." Commander Darius, his arms crossed, frowned. "They're going to come for us. Hard." Kane's jaw tightened. "Then we don't give them the chance." The crew turned toward him, surprised. Kane stepped forward, eyes locked on the star map. "We're done playing defense. It's time to take the fight to them." A stunned silence filled the room. Lyra's voice was cautious. "You're suggesting an offensive." Kane nodded. "They think we're still recovering. They think we're weak. But we have something they don't understand. Our technology, our strategy, and our will to fight. Asterisk, 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 we strike first. And we show the galaxy that humanity does not bow." A slow grin spread across Darius' face. "Now that, I can get behind." The officers around the table nodded, their fear replaced by something else. Determination. A new war was coming. But this time, it would be humanity who started it. And when the dust settled, the galaxy would know one thing. The rise of the human empire had begun. The trap is set. The stars stretched endlessly before the Resolute, but Captain Elias Kane was focused on only one thing, the war to come. The Galactic Council had made their intentions clear. They would not allow humanity to rise again. But Kane had no plans to wait for their attack. Humanity had spent too long surviving. Now, they would strike first. The first step, drawing the enemy Inside the war room, Kane stood before a holographic projection of the Galactic Council's fleet movements. Lyra tapped the controls, zooming in on a key location, Outpost Theta 9. This is one of their forward operating bases, she explained. It's lightly defended, but it acts as a relay station for Council forces. Darius smirked. Which means if it falls, they'll send a fleet to take it back. Kane nodded. Exactly. We take the station, we force the Council to react. And when they do, his eyes hardened, we spring the trap. Lyra hesitated. Captain, this is risky. If they send too many ships, we'll be overwhelmed. Kane's expression didn't change. That's why we don't just take the station. We make them believe we're weaker than we are. Darius chuckled. Let them think we're struggling. Let them send their forces. And then, he clenched his fist. We destroy them. Kane turned to his crew. Make preparations. We move at dawn. The assault on Theta 9. The human fleet emerged from warp just outside Theta 9, their rusted warships flickering with the faint glow of their newly awakened quantum cores. The station's alien defenders immediately scrambled their ships. A council commander's voice crackled over the comms. Unidentified fleet, you are entering restricted space. Identify yourselves, or be fired upon. Kane responded calmly. We are humanity, and we've come to take back what's ours. Before the enemy could react, the Resolute and its fleet opened fire. The battle was quick and brutal. The outdated appearance of the human ships tricked the enemy. They assumed they were fighting a force that could barely keep its weapons online. But when the humans vanished and reappeared behind them, launching devastating attacks, the station's defenders panicked. Within minutes, the outpost fell. The Council's forces barely had time to send out a distress signal before they were wiped out. Kane watched as the station's systems were hacked and taken over by Lyra's team. She turned to him with a smirk. Signal sent. They'll be here soon. Kane nodded. Good. Let's get ready. The Council takes the bait. On the capital world of the Council, alarms blared. A tactical officer shouted across the war room. Theta 9 has fallen. Unknown fleet, possible human survivors, attacked and seized control. Tovak's claws dug into the table. Humans. Senator Vorel narrowed his eyes. If they've truly risen again, we must crush them before they grow stronger. Tovak didn't hesitate. Send the fleet. The Council's response was immediate. A massive armada was dispatched to wipe out the human fleet once and for all. But they had no idea that this was exactly what Kane wanted. The trap is sprung. Hours later, the Council's fleet arrived at Theta 9, their warships surrounding the station. On board the flagship, the enemy admiral smirked. The humans have made a fatal mistake. But then, something went wrong. Their sensors flickered. Their comms cut off. The space around them shimmered, and suddenly, the human fleet appeared behind them. Kane's voice rang through the enemy channels. Welcome to our battlefield. Before the Council ships could react, the human warships struck with terrifying precision. Using the quantum cores, the rusted fleet moved like ghosts, dodging incoming fire and appearing at impossible angles. The battle was a slaughter. Within minutes, the Council's finest warships were burning. The Admiral's face twisted in horror. They were waiting for us. Retreat. Retreat. But it was too late. One by one, the Council's warships fell, their captains realizing too late that they had walked into a trap. The aftermath. Humanity's message. As the wreckage of the battle drifted in space, Kane stood on the bridge, watching as the last of the enemy ships flood into the void. Darius let out a laugh. That was satisfying. Lyra exhaled. We just wiped out one of the Council's fleets. They're going to be furious. Kane nodded. Good. Let them be angry. He turned to his comm officer. Open a channel to the Galactic Council. A moment later, a hologram of Senator Vorel appeared, his expression tense. Kane spoke, his voice calm but firm. You thought we were finished. You thought we were weak. He leaned forward. You were wrong. A heavy silence filled the channel. This is only the beginning. The transmission cut off. Kane turned to his crew. We've made our move. Now we prepare for what comes next. For the first time in centuries, humanity was no longer running. They were fighting back. And the galaxy had just learned a terrifying truth. Humanity was back, and they were stronger than ever. The fear begins. The wreckage of the Council's fleet drifted in space, silent and lifeless. Fires still burned in the shattered hulls of their mighty warships. What was meant to be humanity's final defeat had turned into their greatest victory. On board the Resolute, Captain Elias Kane stood with his officers, watching as the last remnants of the enemy retreated into hyperspace. Commander Leora exhaled slowly. They didn't expect this. Kane nodded. No. And that's what makes this even more dangerous. Commander Darius folded his arms. They thought we were weak. Now that they know the truth. Leora frowned. And if they're afraid of us now, what do you think they'll do next? A deep silence filled the bridge. They all knew the answer. Fear makes enemies reckless. The Council wasn't going to retreat forever. They were going to come back. And when they did, they would bring everything they had. The galaxy reacts. Across the stars, the news of humanity's victory spread like wildfire. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, fear and anger burned like a storm. A transmission from the Vorkuri Dominion played before the Council's leaders. It showed the aftermath of the battle, the floating wreckage, the shattered fleets, the dead soldiers. The image of Captain Kane's message was played over and over. You thought we were finished. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. The Council's chambers were filled with murmurs and whispered conversations. Senator Vorel turned to the assembled leaders. We made a mistake. We believed humanity was broken. We thought their ships were dead relics. But now we see the truth. Grand Marshal Tovak, leader of the Vorkuri, slammed his fist against the table. This is an abomination. We crushed them. We destroyed their worlds. They should not exist anymore. The Chirex High Lord, his insectoid eyes narrowing, hissed, yet they do. And they have proven that they can fight back. The room fell into an uneasy silence. A lesser official spoke up cautiously. Perhaps we should seek peace. Tovak roared in rage. Peace. With them. Do you not understand what has happened? If we do not eliminate humanity now, they will become a threat to the entire galaxy. Senator Vorel nodded slowly. We cannot allow them to regain full strength. They must be stopped before it's too late. A final decision was made. The Galactic Council would not hold back anymore. They would unleash their greatest fleets, their most powerful weapons. This was no longer containment. This was extermination. The terror spreads. Meanwhile, on countless worlds across the galaxy, the fear of humanity spread among the people. For centuries, the alien civilizations had told themselves the same lie. Humans are weak. Humans are defeated. Humans are nothing. But now, they had risen from the ashes. They had taken rusted warships and turned them into weapons of destruction. They had fought the strongest fleets in the galaxy, and won. In the marketplaces, in the slums, in the great cities of the Council's homeworlds, people whispered, the humans are back. And worse, they are stronger than before. Fear turned into panic. Some minor factions began to question whether they should still be part of the Council's war against humanity. Others wondered if it was better to stay neutral or even side with the humans. The galaxy was beginning to change, and Kane knew it. Kane's next move. On the Resolute, Kane and his officers sat in the war room, a holographic display of the Council's main strongholds flickering before them. Leora tapped the controls. We can't sit back and wait. If the Council is preparing a full-scale war against us, we need to strike first. Darius leaned forward. We need to break them. Show them that no matter what they do, We will always rise. Kane stared at the map, his mind already formulating a plan. We make them fear us even more. Asterisk, 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 we attack their heart. Lyora's eyes widened. You mean the capital? Kane nodded. If we strike the Council's core worlds, we send a message to every species in the galaxy. We show them that humanity is not just fighting for survival. We are fighting to win. A heavy silence filled the room. Lyora exhaled. That is insanity. Darius grinned. That is war. Kane turned to his crew. Prepare the fleet. We take the fight to them. The war begins. As the human fleet prepared for its boldest move yet, the galaxy stood on the edge of war. The Council was mobilizing every force they had. The smaller factions were deciding whether to run, fight, or switch sides. And in the darkness of space, the rusted warships of humanity were no longer seen as broken relics. They were seen as unstoppable nightmares. And the galaxy had just realized the greatest mistake in history. They had underestimated humanity. And now, they were afraid. The final battle. The rusted fleet awakens. The human fleet floated in the void, their once rusted warships now humming with newfound energy. The quantum cores, once dormant relics of a forgotten past, pulsed with untamed power. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Elias Kane watched the fleet form up. Every crew member knew what was coming. This was no longer about survival. This was about domination. The plan. Striking at the heart. Commander Lyora tapped on the holographic display. The target flickered into view. A Council core world, a stronghold of power and influence. This planet is one of their military command hubs, she explained. If we take it, the entire sector falls into chaos. Darius smirked. Cut off the head, and the body crumbles. Kane's eyes narrowed. We won't just take it. We will make an example out of it. The plan was simple but daring. The human fleet would use their quantum cores to phase in and out of real space, avoiding detection. They would appear directly inside the Council's strongest defense zone. Before the enemy could react, they would cripple planetary defenses, cut communications, and neutralize key targets. And then, they would leave the entire world in flames. This was no longer just resistance. This was war. The battle begins. The Galactic Council's core world was bustling with activity. The defense forces were confident. After all, this was the heart of their empire. No enemy had ever dared strike this deep into their territory. And yet, the alarm screamed across the planet. Space itself twisted and warped. Suddenly, they were there. The human fleet emerged from the void, appearing right in the center of the planetary defense grid. The rusted warships, once mocked, now looked like demons of the void, their glowing cores pulsing with uncontainable energy. The enemy barely had time to react before Kane gave the order. Attack. The horror unfolds. The first wave of human warships moved like ghosts, phasing in and out of real space. The Council's defense cannons fired wildly, but they hit nothing but empty air. And then, the humans struck back. Orbital stations exploded, their shields torn apart by quantum disruptors. Planetary defense grids overloaded, their systems failing under a storm of electromagnetic pulses. Council warships were ripped apart, their crews barely able to comprehend what was happening. The Vorkari fleet commander, standing on the bridge of his battleship, shouted in horror. What are they? They're moving too fast. Our weapons can't track them. The answer came in the form of a railgun barrage that split his ship in half. Panic spreads across the planet. On the surface, civilians screamed as the sky turned to fire. The government buildings, once symbols of power, collapsed in explosions. The Council's most powerful leaders tried to flee, but their escaped ships were systematically destroyed. The message was clear. No one was safe. The turning point. The Council forces rushed to regroup, desperately trying to counterattack. But every time they locked onto the human ships, They vanished, appearing behind them, flanking them, destroying them. The once mighty Galactic Council, the rulers of the known galaxy, were now prey. Kane's voice echoed through an open broadcast, heard across the entire sector. This is what happens when you underestimate humanity. This is what happens when you try to erase us. Your reign is over. And then, with one final order, he sealed the fate of the planet. Burn it down. The council falls. Fires rage. The once great council world crumbled into ruins. The survivors who managed to flee spread the news across the galaxy. The humans had come, and they had won. The Galactic Council, once the supreme power of the stars, was broken. Aftermath. A new galactic power. Back on the Resolute, the crew watched as the last enemy signals faded. Leora sat back, stunned. It's over. Darius let out a low chuckle. No, this is just the beginning. Kane turned to his officers. The galaxy knows the truth now. He stepped forward, his gaze set on the endless void beyond. We are no longer the survivors of a dead world. We are the rulers of a new age. Humanity had gone from the forgotten remnants of war to the most feared force in the galaxy, and the universe would never be the same again. The aftermath, the rusted fleet reigns. The Galactic Council's core world burned. The once mighty rulers of the galaxy, the ones who had laughed at humanity's rusted warships, now lay in ruins. Their leaders dead or fleeing, their fleets shattered, their power broken beyond repair. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Elias Kane watched the destruction unfold on the holographic display. The world beneath them, once a symbol of control, was now a graveyard of their own arrogance. Commander Leora stood beside him, silent. I never thought I'd see this day. Kane's voice was calm but resolute. We earned this. But he knew the war wasn't over yet. Not completely. The final resistance. Across the galaxy, the remnants of the Galactic Council scrambled to respond. With their leadership crippled, only a few of their most powerful warlords remained. One of them was Grand Marshal Tovak of the Vorkari Dominion. On a hidden moon in the Omega Expanse, he stood before a holographic map of the war. His red eyes burned with fury. We have lost the core worlds, a nervous officer reported. The human fleet is spreading. Many of our allies are abandoning us. Tovak slammed his fist on the table. Cowards, we are not finished. A scared Vorkari general growled. What do you propose? We cannot defeat them in open battle. Tovak's mandibles clicked with rage. Then we do not fight them in open battle. His gaze darkened. We make them suffer. A new kind of war begins. The humans had won the great battles. They had taken the core worlds, shattered the fleets, and sent the council into chaos. But victory had made them a target. Tovak and his remaining forces launched a desperate, brutal campaign. Instead of fighting human warships head-on, they turned to terror and sabotage. Entire human-controlled colonies vanished overnight. Supply ships were ambushed in deep space, their crews never found. Cities on liberated worlds were hit with targeted strikes, killing thousands. Shadow fleets moved in the dark, striking only when the humans least expected it. The message was clear. If the Vorkari could not rule the galaxy, then neither would humanity. The rise of the Empire. Kane knew this war was far from over. Sitting in the command chamber, he studied reports of attacks on human territories. Leora shook her head. They won't fight us like before. They're desperate. Darius clenched his fists. Then we end it. Kane nodded. No more waiting. No more chasing shadows. He turned to his officers. We do what they never expected. We hunt them to extinction. A hush fell over the room. Leora hesitated. You mean? Kane's eyes darkened. Total war. The galaxy had burned once. Now it would burn again. Not for survival, not for revenge, but for conquest. Humanity had won the battle. Now they would take the galaxy itself. They'd bow before humanity. The galaxy was no longer the same. The once great Galactic Council had crumbled. Its fleets shattered, its leaders scattered like dust. Planets that had once been ruled by alien overlords now flew the human banner. But one enemy still remained: the Vorkari Dominion. They refused to surrender. They refused to bow. Instead, they had chosen a war of terror, striking at humanity's supply lines, assassinating key figures, and launching brutal raids against newly claimed human worlds. But they had made one final mistake. They had angered Elias Kane. The final hunt begins. On the bridge of the Resolute, Kane stood before his crew. The holographic map before them displayed the location of Omega Prime, the last Vorkari stronghold. For months, they had played a game of shadows, striking and retreating. Now, the humans would end this war. Kane's voice was cold, filled with absolute certainty. No more hiding. No more waiting. We finish this today. Commander Leora nodded. The fleet is ready. The Vorkari still have strong defenses, but if we hit them hard and fast. Darius grinned. They won't get the chance to run. Kane's eyes burned with determination. Then let's remind them why they fear us. The last stand of the Vorkari. Omega Prime was a fortress world, protected by planetary shields and surrounded by the last remaining war fleets of the Vorkari Dominion. Grand Marshal Tovak stood in the command chamber, watching as human warships emerged from hyperspace. His officers panicked. They're here. The humans have come. Tovak sneered. Then we will show them that the Vorkari do not die so easily. He activated the planetary defenses. Massive ion cannons, hidden across the planet, fired beams of energy into space, striking at the incoming fleet. Explosions rocked the void. But the humans had learned every trick in the book. The rusted warships, once mocked by the galaxy, now moved with terrifying precision and power. The quantum cores activated, and the human fleet phased in and out of real space, dodging the enemy's attacks. One by one, the Vorkari warships fell, their once mighty fleet torn apart in mere minutes. Tovak's confidence shattered as he watched his forces fall like insects. They're everywhere, one of his officers screamed. Tovak's claws dug into his chair. No, this is not how it ends. The end of an empire. Kane's voice echoed through the enemy's comm channels. Tovak, you fought well, but it's over. The Grand Marshal refused to surrender. This is our home. We will never bow to you, human. Kane's expression didn't change. Then you will burn with it. The final order was given. The Resolute led the charge, breaking through the last line of defenses and striking at the planet's core power generators. Within moments, the entire world began to collapse. Cities erupted in fire. The planetary shields failed. The once mighty capital of the Vorkari was no more. Tovak, the last of his kind, stood in his crumbling command center as the flames consumed his empire. And in his final moments, he whispered, "We should never have underestimated them. The age of humanity begins." As the smoke cleared, the last remnants of the Galactic Council and Vorkari Dominion had been erased. The galaxy, once ruled by aliens who had mocked, enslaved, and conquered, now had a new ruler: humanity. The remaining factions, the once powerful races who had stood above humans for so long, sent emissaries to Kane's fleet. One by one, they bowed. One by one, they swore loyalty. And in the great halls of the former Council homeworld, Captain Elias Kane stood before a crowd of leaders, soldiers, and civilians. His voice rang through the stars. They called us weak. They laughed at our ships. They tried to erase us. He stepped forward, staring at the assembled races who now looked at humanity with fear and awe. But now, they kneeled before us. A roar of approval echoed through the fleet. For the first time in history, the galaxy belonged to humanity. And nothing would ever be the same again.